Moving on to the next topic, which is a very important one, the coronavirus. Literally, as I'd finished editing the episode, I actually sent Barry a message with the updated stats, and at that time, it had doubled, tripled, which is absolutely crazy. As we stand now, no doubt this will be a different figure when this episode comes out. But the numbers have increased as well. There's been 361 deaths, and I actually just wanted to talk about the sort of financial implications of it for just a second. I think Barry will go a little bit more into what the deaths mean and that kind of thing. But obviously we saw the Chinese government extending the Lunar New Year holiday, and the financial markets opened essentially this past week, and we saw the equivalent of 300 billion pounds wiped off of the exchange, with shareholders just selling off shares. The government tried to put a whole bunch of cash into the company to try and kind of alleviate the effects of this, or at least anticipated the effects of this. But it had no clear benefit there. Don't you think that's fascinating?
Yeah, it's fascinating and to be expected, right? With this kind of worry and this kind of fear in the markets at the moment, a mass sell-off is to be expected. So
Yep.
the number is staggering. It's hard to even fathom that amount of money. It's hard to imagine that being wiped off of China's economy. And what I also found fascinating was that it wasn't just limited to China. All the Asian markets saw downturns, and even into Europe and the US, they also had impacts.
Definitely.
So it's a reminder of how interconnected our world is. And when a Chinese market goes through a huge crash like that, it impacts everybody around the world. And so it's a scary amount of money, and it's indicative of the amount of fear we're seeing in the world at the moment. There really is a risk of this becoming a real pandemic, and everyone is very, very worried about it. Obviously, the media is becoming a firestorm around it,
Yep.
and it calls for calm, clear leadership and a lot of work to make sure we contain this as best we can and limit the impacts both medically and financially on the world.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just looking at the notes, Barry, you've written down that it's exceeded the SARS virus in terms of number of infections, but luckily with medical intervention, it doesn't look as deadly, which is certainly interesting. But when these conversations come about, people kind of try to reduce these alarmist sort of views and in comparing it to a virus like flu, which has a large number of infections and deaths per year. But this is certainly something to not just glance over, something bigger than SARS. Even though we've luckily been able to intercept the sort of death rate, it's still certainly very concerning.
Yeah, definitely. And the reason that the comparison with SARS is so important is that the coronavirus is a derivative of the SARS
100%.
virus. So it has like parallels, and it's very, very similar in nature. And so what we've seen is that as of time of recording, we've seen 17,205 infections in China itself, and as you mentioned, 361 deaths. And so if you work out that as percentage as to how many people are dying who get the disease, it's less deadly than SARS. And that's a little bit misleading because potentially it's less deadly because our medical intervention has been better than it was with the SARS virus. So we're not necessarily saying that the virus is less deadly, but we've contained it so far on a proportional basis to be less deadly. But the actual absolute numbers of people being affected is now bigger than the SARS virus. So that is quite worrying. I think that the medical interventions have been staggering. Chad, I don't know if you saw, but in the town of Wuhan where this kind of virus got kicked off, China are so desperate to contain it and trying to stop it in that little town. They went and built a fully fledged hospital in 6 days from nothing, from like foundations, from dirt to a fully fledged hospital in 6 days. And if you go and watch a time lapse of them building this, it's one of the most amazing videos you'll ever see. Kind of the feats of engineering, and it just shows you how good China are at developing things and building buildings and kind of getting this off the ground, plus how important it is to fix this as quickly as possible, that you can build a hospital in 6 days, which is absolutely nuts.
Absolutely amazing feat. I haven't watched a time lapse of it, but now that you mentioned there is one, I think as soon as we stop this episode, that's the first thing I'm going to do. Absolutely amazing. I think they built 2 hospitals in a short period of time. And it definitely is a sign of a country coming to the party when it's needed the most, which is good to see. Out of complete interest, Barry, did you know what corona actually means?
I don't. Educate me, Chad.
Well, yeah, here's a little bit of useless information. I believe it's derived from a Latin word where it essentially means crown. So I believe if you look at the biology of the virus itself and the family of viruses, like you mentioned, the SARS virus actually being part of the same family, there is a resemblance there to a crown. So that's what it means.
So it's not from the beer then, Chad?
No, it's not from the beer. They actually put out a statement on Twitter to say, nope, not us. But if you do look on their bottles, there is a crown. So quite interesting there as well.
Interesting.